Hi and welcome. I'm Kelsey Schmitz. I'm the School Mental Health Director for the Northwest Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, and I'm truly honored to have the opportunity to tell you a bit about a series titled Anchored in Our Roots. Anchored in Our Roots is designed to provide BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, school mental health providers resources to navigate the intersectionalities of their work and strategies for anchoring their well-being around their cultural and ancestral roots. We have centered the needs, the voices, and the lived experiences of BIPOC school mental health providers through these conversations and materials. We welcome non-BIPOC providers to lean in, to listen, and to learn how to support our BIPOC colleagues. This series includes foundational resources like these conversations and 2 accompanying workbooks to reflect on these recorded sessions. Our goal is to help BIPOC school mental health providers access collective support and engagement around wellness topics that collectively impact their work and identities. Our esteemed colleagues, Dr. Sabine Thomas and Catrice Tybett-Chapin, have developed these incredible resources. You can locate those resources from the link that's displayed on the screen, and in a moment, I will be passing the mic off to them. I want to start, though, with a land acknowledgement. The Northwest Mental Health Technology Transfer Center and University of Washington Smart Center acknowledges that we learn, live, and work on the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people who walked here before us and those who still walk here. We are grateful to respectfully live and work on these lands with the Coast Salish and Native people who call this home. We also have a link displayed on this slide where you can learn more about the land that you are on. We want to take another moment just to tell you that this work is sponsored by the School Mental Health and Provider Wellbeing Supplements to the Northwest Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. The Northwest MHTTC is part of a network of MHTTCs across the country funded by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. This map helps you locate the region we serve that includes the states of Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington, as well as other regions across the U.S. We welcome you to learn a little bit more about our school mental health supplement, and you can visit the website displayed on this slide. We also just want to take a moment to review this disclaimer that basically states that this material exists in the public domain and can be reproduced or copied without permission from SAMHSA or the authors. We just would appreciate you citing the source. We ask that you not reproduce or distribute this presentation for a fee without specific written authorization from Northwest MHTTC. We also want to note that the opinions expressed in these conversations and these materials are the views of the speakers and do not reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services or SAMHSA. And now I want to take a moment to tell you a little bit about Dr. Sabine Thomas and Catrice Tybett-Chapin, who are the authors and our facilitators for this series. Dr. Sabine Thomas is a naturopathic doctor and an educator. She has extensive background in nonprofit management, in wellness, in infant and early childhood mental health, and user experience research. She graduated from Mount Holyoke College with a BA in socio-medical sciences and a doctorate from Bastyr University in naturopathic medicine. She's an early childhood digital ethnographer and a self-care doctor. She is the co-owner of JSOL Studios, a virtual wellness educational practice, and lives in Tacoma, Washington with her family. Catrice Tybett-Chapin is a multiracial educator who served in the nonprofit sector for over 27 years. She comes from 4 generations of educators who dedicated their life to the educational social justice. Catrice has strong theoretical background in child development and psychology, a BA in child development, a master's in elementary education, and an EDS in school psychology. She works diligently to ensure that everyone who wishes to have a seat at the table has one, feels safe there, and can voice their opinions without retribution. As a practicing school psychologist, she has a special interest in researching and applying best practices in consultation, intervention, and assessment implementation when supporting students and families who are culturally and linguistically diverse. Catrice is an active member of the Washington State Association of School Psychologists, the National Association of School Psychologists, and is a member of OSPI's School-Based Behavioral Health and Suicide Prevention Subcommittee. When Catrice is away from the office, she enjoys spending time with her husband and 4 daughters. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Thomas.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kelsey. It is a pleasure for both Catrice and I to join you today. This is going to be really a conversation around uh, really exploring challenges that our school mental health providers are currently facing and navigating through, as well as areas of self care, self preservation, self appreciation, and really bringing out that magic around our roots and our culture. I am looking absolutely forward to our conversations, and I'm going to ask Catrice to introduce herself.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Catrice Tybert Chapin. I go by she, her. I am currently supporting Vancouver Public Schools as a school psychologist at a high school. Really interesting experience, as I was an early learning provider for over 15, 20 years. And so I jumped into the high school arena, and it's been very unique, very enlightening, and it's a great learning process. I'm just really excited to kind of share my experiences as a school-based mental health provider and as a school psychologist under the National Association of School Psychology. We really do want our school community and our larger community to see us as not just the folks that do the assessments and the referrals, but we also can provide comprehensive, holistic care to the entire community of students, families, and staff. So I'm excited to share my experiences and look forward to many more conversations around this.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Catrice. And my name is Dr. Sabine Thomas. I am a naturopathic doctor by training and currently co-owner of JSoul Studios, where we're able to really create beautiful work and material, as well as education around self-care, self-appreciation, and self-preservation. I'm based out in Tacoma, Washington, and it is a pleasure to have this wonderful conversation with Catrice. Catrice, I'd love to get started here with a question that really is multi-layered, but take us through. As we are navigating these unique times, what are, based on your experience, and just to set the tone, I also want to share with our BIPOC school mental health providers that part of our conversation today, and I know Catrice, you'll share this as well, is we're approaching this from our own lived experience as Black women, as mothers, as professionals. And we are definitely finding that there are parallels in terms of how this experience is showing up in our professional and personal world. And so we will need to make sure that we anchor our conversation around this very important disclaimer for both of us. With that said, Catrice, tell us a little bit about what are some of the challenges that are very unique to our BIPOC school mental health providers, certainly around their personal and professional spheres and specific to their mental health and mental wellness.
Yeah, well, BIPOC school-based mental health providers have such a unique position. We not only can understand and empathize with the community that we serve, many who are part of a diverse community, linguistically diverse, different ability levels. We understand the complexities that exist within the educational system when trying to serve the diverse population that we interface with. So me personally, within the high school setting, what's very unique at my particular high school is that we are extremely culturally and linguistically diverse. I would say close to 60-70% of the population is considered from a different ethnic and racial background. We have a large percentage of students who speak a second language. And so My role as a school psychologist is to be as comprehensive as possible when I receive referrals about students that are having a difficult time with adjusting to the norms presented within the school setting. And when I interface with staff, administrators and counselors and teachers and others about norms, I have to think as a woman of African and Yemenese descent, what are kind of my cultural norms that I grew up with? And how do those norms interface with the norms that the American educational system says we need to abide by? And so I come across some of the terms that we often use, which is like cultural stitching, which is like we have to be bicultural, right? So we have to understand what our own identity is within our home and our community setting, and then what is that school community norm, and what are those cultural pieces that we would need to learn. So there's a set of unspoken rules which between both settings that is very unique. And to be able to interact with those unspoken rules, you have to code switch. And code switching is being able to recognize that you're in a unique new setting that's going to require a set of rules that maybe you're not used to within your own community, but you need to learn them in order to adjust and be ready. So it's very unique when I come across populations, especially now, that are dealing with a lot of trauma with just the pandemic that's happening right now, how that's impacting our diverse families. When I'm coming across the policing and how that's impacting our community. And at the high school level, I'm dealing with young adults that understand what's happening. So they are so our young adults are so used to like processing trauma within their community in a certain way. When they get into the school setting and they try to process that trauma, they are often ostracized for it, kind of punished for processing their trauma in a certain way. And as a BIPOC provider, I have to go in and I have to do some cultural bridging, because I have to tell folks that we're in a situation where some of our students aren't attending every day, virtually or in person, because not only are they in a unique climate, but they're also experiencing some unique traumas that their brain is trying to process that they haven't had to. So I'm in a position where I'm trying to teach the community, the school community, about like the cultural norms and how different cultures process trauma, while still understanding, oh my gosh, I'm processing this trauma too, along with them. So we're kind of in this unique, I don't know a better way of saying it, but kind of mixing of cultural norms. Does that kind of make sense?
It does. I'm thinking when you said cultural stitching, the first imagery that came to mind, and there's so much history about quilting as well, when we think about the roots of quilt. But that's the first item that I started to think about, is really hanging on to every piece of our history and being able to wear these stitches when I think about a quilt and how it embraces layers of culture, personal, professional, is really being able to capture that. So I really appreciate you talking about cultural stitching, and then the space of showing up as a, in your case, a Black, right, school psychologist of Yemenese descent, to really being able to then say, I'm going to now, in addition to wearing my and capturing my cultural stitches, I'm also going to be the bridge, which in of itself is work. It is mental, emotional.
It is a lot of work, and in many many instances when I want to celebrate the fact that I can wear that quilt and I can have staff and parents come to me to understand a little bit more about the traumas that exist within the community that we serve. I mean, that's a beautiful aspect. However, there are some times when I'm wearing that quilt, I'm like, is there someone better suited to share some of this? And I guess there's sometimes like just I might experience like a doubt that I understand the complexities that exist with our entire population, our diverse population. And then I have to realize, where is that coming from? Where's that doubt coming from that I might not be understanding how to culturally bridge this correctly? And then we come across different things such as like the imposter syndrome. Like, I sometimes am asked by administrators, because I am the only Black person of color who is staffed within the mental health piece, as a school psychologist, I'm asked to kind of bring light to different perspectives, to try to create a connection, rapport with the school community, to kind of share information to staff about the nuances that has happened with the educational system, and how ability tracking and grouping exist. And so I'm charged with kind of being like the educational conduit, the cultural conduit, connecting those wires together for people. And I'm like, that's a lot to carry on, because I'm going to tell you, I might not be correcting the wires, and the light might not come on for everyone. And that could be like a fear that I sometimes have when I'm having to do this cultural bridging piece. But it's one that I feel like, as just a woman of African Yemeni descent, I have to do. It's like I'm charged to do it. And some of that charges, it's that whole superwoman piece.
I'm curious as to what are ways in which you, in this space of cultural bridging and being in a real space of, as you've mentioned, sometimes having that imposter syndrome and being asked, and as you mentioned, charged with connecting these wires. How are you filling your own cup?
Well, that's such a good question. I feel that the more, it's really interesting, the more that I'm charged with having to create cultural bridging opportunities for the community that I work with, the more that I actually get to be rooted in who I am, right? So the more I have to like investigate race relations, social justice issues, the intersectionality of abilities, ableism, right? The more that I have to get rooted and know more about my history. And then I come to this point of, oh my gosh, there's so much of my history that I just didn't know, I wasn't exposed to, because we're often just on the go. So for me, learning is filling up my cup. Learning about just education and how it's evolved over a period of time. Learning about the intersectionality of how we exist in the world. Learning about just about the push to advocate for a community and the different activists that did that. There's so many who are part of the BIPOC community, but there's so many allies that we have too. And that's been really inspiring for me, just to dig deeper in history, and just like the know thyself, and know thy community has been really rewarding. I think also just as the community has been dealing with trauma, and I've been working with different students and families about how they've been processing through the whole pandemic. It brought up a lot of just personal things for myself too. So part of my self-care and kind of filling my cup is to seek out support when I need it to, and get like therapeutic care. Because oftentimes we carry the burden of other folks. And sometimes the stories that other people share with us that they're going through, there's a parallel that we share amongst the BIPOC community. And so the idea of like vicarious trauma, cultural trauma, that is very true, and that does exist within the BIPOC school-based providers. And having to have a counselor help walk me through that has been really, really helpful.
Patrice, can you very briefly just define the spaces for just for us in terms of laying out the foundation when we're thinking about, for some, intersectionality is clear. We all understand what it means. But for others, it might be a space completely new. To your point, that hasn't been explored, where there hasn't been any previous exposure, and or if there has been exposure, it's just not been able to put a finger on it to be able to call it intersectionality. So if you could just in one or two sentences just describe what, and there are layers to intersectionality, right?
There are layers. Yes. I perceive it as how we identify and the experiences that we have to interface with throughout our daily lives. So for me, the intersectionality is that I'm a woman of color who's also a mother, who's also a professional in mental health field, who is able-bodied, but who's also experiencing aspects of her race and culture that are unique to me as a person of color. There's also within intersectionality, we think about ableism, right? We think about socioeconomic status, so access to resources and that piece. We think about educational attainment. So there's just, I think there's just so many institutional structures, right, that we interface with and we have to weave throughout. And how does that impact our development and our sense of identity? I hope that kind of helps.
Yes, no, absolutely. It does help. And to your point, how there's an opportunity to show up for families, how there's an opportunity to show up for students, for parents, for peers, and certainly for ourselves, right? In terms of being able to examine and or reflect upon those layers that you shared. And intersectionality can be so unique, but multi-layered to everyone. You also talk about vicarious trauma.
Yeah.
And there's trauma is trauma. What is vicarious trauma?
She's like, what is that? It is, so a lot of times vicarious trauma is often seen with like doctors, psychologists, counselors will experience vicarious trauma when their clients are experiencing something that similarly matches what they have experienced themselves or what their community may have experienced. So our clients are giving us information and we are kind of empathizing, sympathizing with it because of previous experiences. I feel like vicarious trauma and cultural trauma kind of are seamlessly together and interwoven. Sometimes compassion fatigue is kind of in the mix of that too. But I have to be honest, compassion fatigue is often defined as kind of like mental health workers burnout, right? Like you're experiencing so much of the trauma that you're starting to become numb to it and kind of fatigued of it. And I feel like as people of color, and as just a Black woman, like I don't have time to fatigue that way, because not only am I experiencing what my clients are experiencing, I'm having to work. I have to be as 100% on as possible to help find solutions to encourage my clients to work through that, right? To understand what they're a part of and work through it. So I'm not going to say that no mental health providers of color, like they don't experience compassion fatigue. I just feel like we probably experience more of racial battle fatigue.
Mm.
If that's fair to say, because of the systemic oppression and marginalization that exists, that is fatiguing, knowing that if you're the only Black person of color who is at your school and you're having to deal with the oppressive discipline structures that are existing, oppressive our educational normalized academia that exists that doesn't reflect your student population and has like racist or negative connotations to it. Because I feel like if we have curriculum that's set for all students, but this curriculum only mentions one sector of students, that is oppressive in nature, right? So not sharing the holistic curriculum of all students is kind of erasing a group of people's culture. And that is part of that racial battle fatigue, is like understanding those nuances that are happening, quietly happening, right? Because you don't know that your curriculum should be holistic. If you're a parent, sometimes like you just charge the school with taking care of your community. But as a BIPOC mental health provider, I have to look through, like, students are not always engaged because they don't see themselves within their school, within their curriculum. And so that's part, I believe, of that racial battle fatigue, is trying to bring a spotlight to some of these issues that are happening with discipline, special education referrals, the erasure of culture within a curriculum, but still trying to work holistically with the team to come up with some better solutions. So I feel like we experience that more so than the compassion fatigue. It's just my personal experience.
I thank you. Thank you for sharing, and I thank you because this continues to eliminate what may not necessarily be taken into consideration, even to reflection, because it sounds like and I'm not sure if opportunity is the word that I want to use here, but there are spaces, we'll call them, where school mental health providers are likely just going through the process. BIPOC school health providers, mental health providers are going through the process without having even an opportunity to unpack what you just shared, right? And or not being able to put a finger to a specific word and or a definition, or specifically have words to land to these, right, to these definitions. I am curious about it. I'm not sure if necessarily is a solution, but how have you in your space as this bridge, right, this powerhouse that comes in as a bridge, how have you negotiated this space with peers, but also decision makers, when you've raised, right, when you've raised this up? How has it showed up? Have you noticed that there are ears, that there is support there, and if you've come across a space where support hasn't necessarily showed up this way, how have you built that support, right, within that system?
Yeah. Well, I felt, for me, part of my like personal growth is to have acquired as much information I could on how to share the experiences of BIPOC students and families to staff in a way that they could understand it and help me process it. as a whole. And so for me, I'm like, well, if I know something, if I can research something, if I can share something, let me just do some professional development training with the staff. And luckily, I have a really receptive administrative team that was like, go share it, speak it on the top of the mountains. Now, I did speak it on the top of the mountains, and I got a lot of people that were like, I don't understand. I'm like, okay. So I might have been a little zealous with my first one, which is fine, because I learned that I don't need to scale back. If I know the truth and I know I need to present information a certain way, that means that we just need to have some more trainings, right? So I remember I did a training not too long ago for our school team, just about ability grouping and tracking for our BIPOC student population, because we have a significant number of students who are very diverse, and just educational abilities, behavioral health. We have quite a few students that are part of the juvenile system, justice system. And so just trying to navigate those layers of who our students were with what kind of resources we can provide for our students and understand our students was really important to me. But at the time that I was presenting, we had come across a lot of stuff that was happening, like within the US with the shootings and that happened in, I believe, Colorado. We had the Asian American and Pacific Islander, the hate crimes that were happening. And we have a huge population of Pacific Islanders at our school. And so with that, I decided to do like a moment of silence to just honor the lives that were lost and to just recognize as a group of people that we need to do this kind of stuff. We need to recognize what's happening. Well, a lot of people were just like, kudos, right on. We've never had this happen at a training before. And then we had a whole bunch of people who were like, you ran out of time at the end of your training and we really liked it. Do you think you need to spend because I also did a land acknowledgement. Do you think you need to spend 4 minutes on doing a land acknowledgement in a moment of silence? And I was like, oh my gosh, we have so much learning to do, right? But what I thought was oh my gosh, we have so much human kindness to teach, right? This is humanity. So regardless of our race, our ethnicity, our culture, we're human beings. And we had humans that experience their loved ones being taken away from them. For us not to be able to recognize that, especially when we had a significant percentage of students who are Pacific Islander, would have been inappropriate. It would have been, I felt like part of social justice is an act, right? It's a verb. You act, you move towards it. You recognize the inequalities and you work on building equity and equality in places that don't exist. And so I'm the very least we can do is just recognize. And so it's interesting because, I'm I know what I'm doing is important. And this just confirmed how important it is. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of my self-care in those situations when I was getting these emails, just oh, it's okay. What I did was, it's good what I did, because it's teaching them about empathy too. Mm-hmm. And understanding. So teaching is one of the big things that I've felt has been helpful to kind of do that cultural bridging, and also providing a platform for students. We had a virtual student voice forum. It was just a moment where our BIPOC student population had an opportunity just to share about what's happening with them. What are they experiencing with the pandemic, with the political stuff that's going on, with the policing within their community. So it's just a time for just young adults to be able to share and to tell us what they need from us. So that was something that I thought was really important, and that I've tried to do to help bridge those cultural gaps.
You're sharing around the reality of the past, 17 months now, roughly. I think we've stopped counting. Yeah. Has kind of made me think a little bit about a conversation I had with one of my favorite mentors and one of my friends. We talked about this, to quote her words, we were talking about a colleague, and she said, this colleague makes me feel seen. I feel like someone is finally and seen beyond the individual that shows up physically, but seen across intersectionality in terms of how she's coming to work, showing up as a Black woman, showing up as a mama. And then one of my mentors, in a very respectful way, but sad way, also referred to a most recent tragedy as Civil Rights 2.0. And my questions for you are really related around these two anecdotes around what if any, what has been, and I'm being very careful around this, but what has been the silver lining around and or for BIPOC providers, BIPOC school mental health providers, going through a pandemic exacerbated by the murder of George Floyd, exacerbated by Asian hate. What, if any, has been in silver lining around lessons learned? And I will ask just another layer to this question is, I feel like sometimes when I talk about myself, I need to add, and my Black excellence, and my Black girl's magic, and short of being able to put a crown on my head. But and I'm curious if you and I talk about this space of ensuring that we come through our strength. We have strong roots. We have strong cultural roots. The melanin that runs through our blood and shows up in our skin is so rich, right? How do we show up through these spaces? So I know this is a multi-layered question. So I'll pause a little bit and just highlight silver lining, and from that space of rich. Yes, there's endurance, there's resilience, but how else do we show up? How have these unfortunate events really propelled us to raise a hand and say, yes, 1, see me, 2, I want to be seen, and 3, I really want to raise incredible red flags around my work as a BIPOC school mental health provider?
I would say a silver lining has been, there's so much publicity in social media that a lot of administrators and teachers and interventionists rely on BIPOC professionals to help navigate, define, and provide strategies to supporting our diverse population of students. So that reliance before was sometimes more of, I'm going to give you a little bit more work to do because you match this person's culture. And so I'm going to have you do all the hard work. Whereas right now, we're in a place as BIPOC providers where we can actually be teachers, right, to the folks that need to be actually serving the students. So we're not just understanding students, serving students, teaching students now. We're actually supporting the folks that should be doing it on a daily basis with information, strategies, and techniques that they can use from now onto the future. So I think that's one of the big pieces that I'm really excited about, is that people are ready to listen to us and are receptive to the strategies and the interventions that we're sharing. I think another piece is that silver lining is that I feel like we have just a wonderful voice now. Like we had a voice before, but we were often put in positions where, like if I was in a meeting and I needed to talk about cultural bridging, of course I would bring it up. But there are certain times where I'm like, I'm just really tired of talking about this topic like every day. So I'm just going to be kind of quiet, or I'm just not going to I'm going to tread the water a little bit, because I got to keep myself mentally sane, because we keep talking about the same thing over and over. But now we're in a point where like I can just yell it out loud and boldly. Of course, understanding, you have to understand your community that you're working with, but I can voice it so much more loudly and clearly and more confidently what we need to do for changes. And our folks are receptive to it. I'm like, I don't think I'm like at all like a tiger. But I'm not a kitten either. So, right. So I'm like, when I'm thinking about voicing it loudly, I'm more thinking about like, how do we assert ourselves where we're not seen as like the angry Black woman or someone who is like combative, right? We're now at a stage where we're past the angry Black woman, because we're dying, like, by, right? Like not on our own volition, but like people are literally killing off our community. And so it's more like, how do we like help preserve and save a group of people, like from things that are beyond their control, right? I feel like the school population is, at least where I'm at, they're really eager to try to help versus harm. And so that's been really helpful.
I can only imagine, right? As you've mentioned, being able to say it and really being able to say it always with confidence, no matter what, and having an opportunity. You see, I think during the pandemic, the demystifying space around mental health and mental wellness is one layer. Still is. I'm now seeing so much more knowledgeable conversation, comfortable conversation, fluid conversation around self-care, self-preservation, self-appreciation, as I like to call it, and define it. And at the same time, layered with our racial injustices, folks are now able to say, I did not, which I've heard so many times, I did not know. Mm-hmm. And or I did not realize it was this prevalent. I did not realize it existed in my community. And it sounds like, based on what you share, Patrice, is yes, the voice. You're now, it's as if being seen is one, but it sounds like you're also being heard. Mm-hmm. You're being heard, and there is action, right? And you have never said this has been easy in our conversation. Nowhere have you said this. And I'd like to ask, what are strategies? What are some of the strategies you've employed, in addition to the obvious? What are strategies you've employed for school mental health providers where their environment has been impacted, but it may not be as ready or willing to listen, right? What has made a difference for you? What are some areas where, and or suggestions, where school mental health providers, can we think about strategies? It's like, great, it has happened. You're now being seen. You hopefully are being heard. And if no action is taking place, this is one thing you can do. And or if you're not being fully listened to, this is one thing you can do.
Yeah, this is kind of unique, but one of the things that I wanted to do was to have like a mental health rest stop for all staff. So what we did was I connected with their school counselors, and I asked them if during a lunch hour, whatever that would be, if we could just do some mindfulness, some meditation, some deep breathing exercises, because I wanted the entire school population to understand that we all are experiencing like trauma right now, right? Whether you're it's direct or indirect. We're all experiencing it. So we all need to have a mental health rest stop. And so we started with a couple of sessions. And then our school counselors just took it over and started to do one for teachers and one for staff once a week. I think by initiating that opportunity for all staff to be able to be acknowledged as needing some respite, needing some care, it allowed for like the acknowledgement that we're all facing something and we all need help. And so please, please take advantage of this rest stop. And then if you need any help with anything else, I'm here. Our school counselor is here. We're here. And so by creating that space and building that rapport with staff, it made it easier for them to email me or call me about race relations and things that occurred because they knew that I was about healing, right? I was acknowledging that that we are all experiencing this in a certain way, but certain groups of people experience it a little bit differently, right? And some a whole lot more different, but it just allowed them to feel comfortable and safe enough just to come. So even with the folks that were like, you shouldn't be doing these moments of silence and land acknowledgements, they came to me though, right? Like, whereas before they may have never emailed me or called me or even asked me about why I'm doing what I'm doing, but now it just created a space where at least they're coming to me, even though it's not what I want to deal with all the time. They feel safe, right? And so the whole thing about BIPOC mental health providers is, do you feel safe? And do the people around you feel safe? Because that safety and that trust and that rapport is what we're going to need in order to build a better future and build a future we all understand, right? I might not like what you are doing, but I need to at least understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. Because if I understand, it comes from a place where I can teach.
Of course, the concept of healing resonates so much, so much with me, so much with my background and how I really approach even in intersectionality is being able to take it to that space of not just adding a Band-Aid and letting it settle and letting the skin heal, but actually getting to the root, getting to the deep layers of healing. And I also know that every single person heals in a very unique way. The pattern, the stitches, the way the skin remeshes. I'm taking us on a whole different path here, but the way
I love it.
It looks and feels very different, and it also depends as to where some of that trauma to the skin was experienced, where that trauma to the body, the mind, the culture, the being, right, was experienced. And it sounds like you have approached this from a place of, let's just be in that space of healing. Let's just be about the intention and the energy of healing. And if you approach it from that, the rest will manifest, right? Because you're saying even when you were receiving these calls around or hearing feedback around showing it, can't do that, but anyways, showing the land acknowledgement, really just taper down the moments of silence. even these spaces, right, that we're approaching you that way, we're open to healing. Let's just try it, right? And it sounds like one of your strategies was from that space. If you're coming, something is resonating with you. If you're coming in a space of healing, something is resonating with you. Let's expand it. So you are also Patrice, you're a leader. You're a leader. And I'm curious for our school providers, for providers who may feel like I can't do it, 2, they won't come. and 3, no one is fully listening to me. What's the first place they can start just to support themselves, right? When facing all these challenges, where's the first space that they can, where's the first pot that they can dip in, the cup that they can first dip in to support their own sanity and space?
I was reading like this parents magazine article about kiddos that have like scrapes or ouchies or eczema, just wounds that are open, that you want to keep it moist. You don't want it to scab up, right? Because scabbing leads to scarring and all that. So when I read that, I was like, keeping it moist, okay. You know I'm going for with this. But I thought, wow, what an interesting concept is keeping yourself hydrated, keeping yourself aware and actively engaged in the here and now, and being mindful of that piece. So I feel like just the act of being mindful of where you're at, what you're experiencing, and what you want is like a good first step. It's just knowing that. And I think knowing that gets to the roots, right? Like you got to water yourself, right? So it comes to some of the basic pieces of like healthy nutrition. It comes through hydration, comes through exercise, comes through getting your vitamin D, your sunlight. I mean, if you can't change anything around you right now, you can change you though, right? And you can start doing those self practices. And I'm so excited about our next segment because we're going to be able to dig deep into that even more.
Patrice, that is perfect. Thank you indeed. You took it and run with it, and I love it. I love it because it applies. I love what you shared and want to highlight it, that there's only one element that is that you're really able to move with, and that is yourself. There is absolutely nothing about the environment that one can change less the environment is willing to move with it. However, you can continue to support, maintain, keep yourself strengthened, right? Mind, body, and soul. And so I'm looking forward to our next conversation, which will, in fact, really focus around roots. You've talked about it, really anchoring those roots, keeping those roots moist, hydrated, fed, keeping the soil really that continues to support these roots as well fed with nutrition. And so I thank you, Catrice, for engaging in this conversation. Thank you, Kelsey, who got us introduced here in terms of the work that we're going to continue doing, the conversation, the enriching conversation we're going to continue. Our next conversation will be around really strategies around self-care, for sure. Self-care as in we understand it, self-preservation, as I like to think of as the next layer of self-care, very specific, particularly to us as Black women and BIPOC community and members of the BIPOC community. And then the third layer, as I like to think of it, is self-appreciation. So I'm looking forward to our next conversation. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Catrice. And for everyone who's listening to us and or watching us, know that many of the definitions that Catrice mentioned, the points that Catrice mentioned, will be a little bit more defined in our accompanying workbook. And so we're encouraging you to view and or work through some of these pages, do your own reflection, engage with the words. I think that's the first space. We both think this is a great space to be able to start thinking about definition and anchoring ourselves around them. So thank you so much, and be ready for our next conversation. Thank you, Catrice.
Thank you, Dr. Cup.
Thank you so much, Catrice and Sabine, for that conversation. I heard themes around the intersectionalities of BIPOC school mental health providers. I heard you all speak to vicarious trauma and a term that was new to me, which was racial battle fatigue. I heard you talk about safety and trust and healing. And Patrice, I really liked how you talked about being mindful of where you're at. And if you can't change anything around you, you can change you. Which leads us into our next conversation, as you mentioned, on self-care strategies, self-preservation, and self-appreciation. I really hope you all will take the time to watch this very important next recorded conversation. And just a reminder to reach out to the Northwest MHTTC School Mental Health Supplement. Here is our contact information. You're welcome to join our newsletter, and we encourage you to connect with us on social media. Thank you for your time today.